give me the whole hour.
That's okay. We'll make it work. All right, so we have hold on just a second. We've got this really old Amazon, I don't want to say its name because it'll turn on, but it's like really old and it's super touchy now because it's like old. So if I say any word that starts with AL, it turns on. Yeah, I got it like, yeah, I don't know. I need to get rid of it. I never use it. Anyways, that's what happens when you get stuff used, I guess, right?
I'm scared.
So, all right, we're going to go ahead and kick this off. Everyone that is here, thanks for joining up. Hope you're having a good Sunday. So what we're going to do is we actually have 45 minutes. So that's perfect. We'll make it work. So what we're going to do is we're going to kick this off with a quick run through of, and I've kind of whipped up a little process to go through with you guys here. I'm going to touch on, and I say touch on, and I'll explain in a minute, but I'm going to touch on semantic HTML. I'm going to touch on composition of a basic web page, like the layout. I'm going to touch on classes. We're not really going to get into IDs and stuff like that. We're not going to go too deep down the rabbit hole on like specificity selectors and CSS, just purely because we don't have time. But I will also get into a few properties in CSS that I use all the time. All the time. Maybe you've seen them, but you just haven't had as much exposure yet, and I'll kind of show you how I normally set it up. We're going to go over CSS reset. We're going to go over the box model, again, just briefly, kind of like high level, and then we're going to go over Flexbox as well. We're not going to have time to get too in-depth with it, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a few properties in this site I like called Flexbox Froggy, and then I'm actually going to drop it all. I have links on all of this stuff that I'm just going to drop as I'm talking about it in Zoom so that you can open that up in your browser, and then later this afternoon or this week, if you want to study more in depth on it, you can. I know some of the people here in this call are actually in Lambda and are heading into their first build week right now. So this may be a refresher for you. That's actually awesome because that if you recognize everything I'm about to talk today, that means you have learned a lot in just a month or two at Lambda. For the rest of you, this may be new, and some of it may seem a little like, oh, this is super weird. It kind of seems like I don't fully understand it. That's okay. If you don't understand it all right now in this first passing on the Zoom, that's totally cool. Like I said, I'm going to be dropping links for you to study. And a lot of this stuff is stuff that you don't actually even get until the first at least few weeks in Lambda School. So by just getting exposure to it now, you're actually getting a jump.
How's Lambda School?
What's that? Did someone say something? Okay, it's all right. I'll keep going. If someone had a question, just know I'm gonna save about 10-15 minutes at the end, all right, for questions, and not just about what we're talking about here, but I'll take a few quick questions about Lambda School as well. Sound good? Just not as an official spokesperson of the school. I'm here just as a student like you to pass on what I know, but I can tell you about my experience in Lambda School if you'd like. All right, so what we're gonna do is I'm gonna share my screen. Let's go ahead and share this. All right, so this is CodePen, and CodePen is going to look really familiar for those of you who are already in Lambda School. If you're not in Lambda School yet, I'd really encourage you to go make a CodePen account. I'm going to make call this Career Karma HTML/CSS demo, and I'll drop this link when we're done at the end. Okay. So we're going to be filling in this page here with a bunch of content as we go along. So first off, I want to talk about something called semantic HTML. So this is the first link that I'll drop in the channel. Semantic HTML is a great way for, so most of you that have been self-studying, whether you're doing Lambda's free curriculum or like me for a few months before I found Lambda, I was kind of like blindly stumbling around on the internet trying to like Google free resources on my own and just kind of picking up stuff through osmosis. And you probably, I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have written HTML and CSS, but you might have written a lot of stuff with like divs, right? Like div and then another div, which stands for like division, right? You're nesting divs inside of each other. Well, what happens if someone with a screen reader comes to your site and they want to read everything on the screen. Well, as it turns out, screen readers don't work that well with just what we call div soup, right? It's kind of like when you would have like alphabet soup, right? Like as a kid, I'd get like the cheapo alphabet soup cans of whatever from the store, beg my parents to get me some, and you look down, it's like, it's just a bunch of letters everywhere, right? Well, when a screen reader looks at your page from someone who maybe is like really hard of sight or something like that, the screen reader actually can't read divs that well. Now, divs are useful, but really divs should be used to group content after you've already semantically defined your page. Now that sounds super confusing, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into what that means. So here's a great example, and I'm going to blow this page up temporarily a little bit. Here's a great example of a layout of a page, right? We've got a header, and header would be like, you know, you go to like Facebook, right? And there's a nav bar up at the top. You've got like the Facebook logo. You click that, it takes you to the home page. It's got like a drop-down menu for your notifications and your messages and stuff like that. That stuff would go up in this area. This example defines nav right below it, but you actually can put the header nav up in the header if you want to. And someone's unmuted. I'm just going to go ahead and mute them. Cleo, I'm going to mute you just for sake of time. All right. So we've got a header section, and we've got nav up here, and then we've got sections inside of here. We can have we can have a section of the page. We can have an aside. Aside is not used that much in HTML to define a part of your page, but maybe you have you've seen websites, I'm sure, before that have like a static sidebar, right? Something on the side of the page that just stays fixed, and then like as you scroll down the page, the sidebar is there. Instagram has that. If you go to Instagram, they've got like your little profile thing on this right-hand side and whatever on the desktop Instagram site. So you could use an aside tag for that if you wanted to. And then you could use these other things, but finally you have footer down at the bottom, right? And that makes sense. Like a footer for this page would be all of this stuff right here, right? This is the footer of the page down here. So that is semantic tags instead of just using like a div for the top of all the content up here and then like a div at the bottom. By using header and nav and footer and section tags and stuff like that, what happens is when someone scans your page with a screen reader, the screen reader will actually automatically say, oh, this is the header, and this is what's inside of the header, and then this is a section of the page, and here's what's inside of this. You know, it'll actually maybe read it off to them or select parts of the pages based on that. If you're hearing all of this and you're thinking, oh, this is crazy, this sounds overwhelming, that's okay. I've been at this for 9 months now, and sometimes semantic HTML still trips me up. So this is something that's going to come with time. Don't panic about it now. Just know that this exists as we move into this today, and that this is something that's important. It's important because, believe it or not, tech companies have gotten sued over having websites that are horrible for people that are maybe it's not a very accessible site, and they had a hard time reading it or having a screen reader read it to them. And companies have gotten sued over that, because just like a business should make their entryway to their business like wheelchair accessible and accessible for people that maybe can't use the stairs, you know, having an elevator or whatever, your website should be accessible to everyone, right? We want to be inclusive in tech. We want to make sure that everyone has a piece of the pie and that everyone is able to use your site. So that's what semantic HTML is. I'm actually going to drop this inside of the Zoom chat for everyone here. And it looks like you guys are chatting a little bit already. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and post that. Whoops, sorry, I just sent that to Chris. Let me send it to everyone. There we go. Let's see, I'm seeing some people dialoguing about helpful for all. Yeah, if you're talking about semantic HTML, this is not a Lambda thing. This is a tech industry thing. Anyone making a website these days in 2019 is using a semantic HTML. So let's see here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and jump back over here to CodePen, and we're going to go ahead and set up a basic structure for our document. Okay. First off, we had a header tag, right? I talked about a header tag. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to create that header tag here. And don't worry about trying to do all of this alongside me in CodePen unless you really, really want to. You totally can. I'm not going to say you can't. But I will be posting this link when I'm done. So we're going to have a header tag here. And inside of this header tag, we're actually going to have a nav bar. And I'm just doing shorthand. I'm typing nav, and then I'm pressing tab, which in CodePen automatically creates the opening and closing tag for me. So I'm going to have that in here. And for sake of time, I'm actually going to copy and paste something that I prepared beforehand. I'm going to paste in some links in here. I'm going to save this. I'm going to save this. And I have prepared for you just some simple links, right? Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And if we were to click on each of these, it would take us to the homepage. Actually, you have to right-click and open it in a new tab, because since it's CodePen and it's self-contained, if I click this right now, it'll actually throw an error. It won't allow me to leave with this link, but it works if you right-click. So a few things here to start off with. We've got a header tag, and inside of it for our document, we've got a nav tag. That would tell someone with a screen reader that this is the nav section, right? So if they have a screen reader and they're like, oh, where's the links to go different places? It would say, hey, right here, because of the nav tag inside of the head. This is important. I've also thrown some classes on here, which we'll get into in just a minute, so don't worry about those yet. The one other thing is I'm actually going to throw an H1 tag, and for those of you who have written even a little bit of HTML, I'm sure you've probably seen H1 tag and probably H2, H3, whatever. The list goes on. But these allow us to define header tags. That's what it stands for. H1 would be the dominant header tag, probably just one of them in the header of your document. And I'm just gonna put my name. You know what? Instead of that, let's do Career Karma, because it's awesome that we're here at Career Karma. So there we go. We've got everything popping up on our page. We've got our header tag. We've got a headline, and we've got a nav component with links inside of our nav. Next thing that we want to do is we actually want to go ahead and we want to define the main part of our document. So we're going to type in main. This is important as well. Just like the header would tell someone scanning with a screen reader or something like that, scanning this document, the header tag would tell them that that's, the header. This tells them this is where the meat and potatoes are of this document, right? This is, on this web page, this is the main content. Everything inside of this opening and closing tag is the core part of this specific web page. And that's semantic, right? Semantic means it's giving something meaning. And inside of here, we're actually going to use a couple of section tags. So what's a section tag? Well, we talked about them briefly. I'm actually going to use two. So section tags tells someone, again, or something scanning this page, these are inside of the main tags. These are two sections, right? That seems so self-explanatory, but you would not believe how few people actually follow through on using these tags. And again, that can be a nightmare for people that are using a screen reader. So inside of here, I'm going to copy and paste a couple of things, again, that I prepared beforehand. I'm going to copy and paste some text in here. I'm using lorem ipsum. It's this old, like Latin, just document that is used by designers, it's used by programmers as placeholder. So what I'm doing right now is I've pasted this content inside of p tags. And this, again, is very semantic. The p tag stands for paragraph. And what the p tag or the paragraph tag allows us to do is it's telling, again, someone with a screen reader or some application that's scanning our page, this is text content. This is a paragraph within our website. So now we have a main component. I'm going to pull this down a little bit. We've got a main component with two sections inside of it, two sections, and inside each section, there are two paragraph tags with content. The final thing that we want to do is we actually want to use the footer tag. And you guessed it, this is, like I said before, at the bottom of the web page. This tells someone scanning the page, this is the end. Anything in here might be like the logo of the company, a copyright. You might actually have a nav bar in your footer, but it's the nav footer. And you've probably all seen that before, right? You scroll down to the bottom of a web page and it'll say, here's our address and here's links to our contact page and like our about page and here's like our return policy and refund policy and like all of that kind of stuff might be down in the footer. Well, that's all inside of a nav tag. We're actually going to go ahead and do that here as well. We're going to pull a nav tag in, and it's actually going to be the same nav tag that we used up in the header, but this time it's in the footer. And if that seems counterintuitive, just think about the fact that this up here would be our dominant nav bar. And down here in the bottom, in the footer, this would just be if someone scrolls down to the bottom, it'll tell them, hey, there's also nav here with corresponding links. So now we've got the basic structure of the web page that we're going to be using for today scaffolded out. We've got our title, we've got links, we have sections with paragraph tags, and we have a footer tag with a nav bar and links inside of it here as well. So our page right now is semantic. It's very basic. Obviously, in real life, we'd be beefing this up a lot, but this is just to learn, right? So we have this basic semantic page scaffolded out in HTML. Now we need to style it. We need to throw some stuff on here so that it doesn't look like it's just junky, right? This might have flown in like maybe the 90s, but it's 2019 and we need to make this page look nice. So let's go ahead and shift over to our CSS area here. And we're actually mostly done in the HTML section. We will be going back through and adding on some classes as we go, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So before we go any further, the next thing that I want to talk about is CSS reset. So you might notice here inside of this page that there's like some space up here, right? And like the text has like default styling. It looks like someone's unmuted, so I'm going to go ahead and mute them. There we go. All right. So we have actually some default styling here. And I'm not going to go too deep into how to use the dev console, but actually if you look up elements here, see I'm highlighting this this p tag right here. See it says career karma inside of the H1 that we wrote up here, right here. If you actually look over here at the CSS styles that are currently on it, notice over here it's italicized user agent style sheet. What is user agent style sheet? Well, that's actually my browser. Every browser, Chrome, Firefox, Safari, if you're using Opera, or maybe if you're like using Brave, if you're into crypto stuff, you're using the Brave browser, or Tor, or whatever you might choose to be using, they all have default CSS styles. And believe it or not, some of them are a little bit different than others. It's because those companies, Google, and then Apple with Safari and all those different brands, someone sat down and they said, hey, this should be the default styles for our page. Things have gotten a lot better now than they used to be, but there's still some variation. So as you can see, there's actually default styles applied here. There's actually default margins. There's a default font size and all of this stuff. And you know what? That's going to make it really difficult when we start styling our page because we're going to have to be fighting this default stuff. Well, as it turns out, there's a way to fix that. It's called a CSS reset. And what you do is someone much smarter than me sat down and they compiled a bunch of CSS styles that would reset to like, you're basically zeroing everything out. All of those custom default styles that ship with browsers, you're just zeroing all of them out so that you're starting from a blank slate. You know, like if you've ever sat down and you've like drawn, whether it's crayons, watercolor, anything, even just sketching with a pen and pencil, it feels nice to have like a blank canvas, right? When you start drawing. Well, that's essentially what we're doing with CSS reset. So what we're going to do is normally you could copy and paste this in right into your CSS here. As it turns out, CodePen has a really nice setup where you can actually go into your settings and you can click on CSS. You can actually right here click reset. Boom. Save and close, and whoa, look at that. See how everything became instantly the same size of font, everything. It got rid of the extra spacings on the paragraphs and all of the margins on stuff. We just zeroed everything out. We are at a blank canvas right now. Before I go any further, I actually want to drop this in the Zoom chat and see how the Zoom chat's doing. There you go. And I love what you're saying. Thank you, Chris, for answering those questions. You're right on the money there. Yep. Anyone, if someone's blind, you know, or has some other need that we can serve them with semantic HTML. Like I said earlier, tech is all about inclusion, right? We want to have a diverse work environment. We want to have a diverse product. And this is one way that you are looking after the diversity that you have in your users for people that might be hard of sight or even blind. Someone just joined on their iPad. I'm going to mute them. Please remember to keep yourself muted until the end, and we'll have some question time. All right. So I'm not going to copy and paste this in, but I just remember you can, in the settings, select CSS reset in CodePen. Normally, you'd need to copy and paste all of this into your CSS document. Many of you have already done that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to come over here to CSS, and we're going to do a few things. I'm going to start running through this fairly quickly, but I'm going to explain it as I am doing it, and then I'll post this link when I'm done. Does that sound good? So first off, I defined star. Now, star in programming is frequently used whenever you see it used. It is meant to basically mean select everything. Okay, so I am selecting everything, all the page, all of the tags, everything. And for everything, I'm going to apply a box sizing border box. Now, what is that? Box sizing border box. I'm actually going to paste a link into the chat if people want to do more reading on box sizing border box. Essentially what this means is that as I start applying margins and I start applying borders and stuff, instead of everything just getting bigger and bigger and blowing up, you know, that it looks like you're unmuted. So, oh, thank you. Thank you for muting. Okay, so what it essentially does is instead of it blowing the box up, and you know, you start with a box that's 50 pixels high and 50 pixels wide, and then you throw on a border and margins. If you don't have this property on, it just keeps expanding that box. It keeps making things bigger and bigger. If you have box sizing border box, what happens is if you have a 50 pixel by 50 pixel box, you know, a section, like say one of these paragraph tags, and then you throw a border on it and margins, it expands things inward. So, oh, awesome. It looks like we have upgraded minutes. Thank you, Chris. So what this means is that as you, instead of having the box blow up, which, think about that for a minute, that would be a nightmare to start styling, because you get one thing perfect and then you go over and you work with something else and it's like, and it blows up and it messes up your entire page. Instead, it allows you to define a box, and then inside of it, you can adjust margins and padding and everything like that. It's something that I didn't fully understand, but as you get more reps in CSS, that will come with time. Eventually, you'll realize just how amazing that is. For now, I'm going to go ahead and move on. We've applied that to everything. The other thing that we're actually going to do is we're actually going to set our font size to 62.5%. And we're also going to give the background, let's do background of light gray. Let's see, there we go, that applied. So let's see here. So what have I done with all of this? Well, background, that probably makes sense to everyone, right? I gave a background color of light gray. Light gray is a word here instead of like a hex value that you might have seen. CSS actually has a limited number of colors that are predefined by name. Like I could do red or something like that, although I don't want to give anyone, I don't want to burn anyone's retinas. So we're going to use light gray. And then I defined font size. What I'm doing with fonts here is going to be a little bit interesting. The best way that I can explain what this is here is just to keep on going. And when I define my first text size, then I'll come back to this font size and tell you what's going on. I'm also going to select the H1 tag, the H2, the H3, the H4, and the H5. Now, what did I just do with all of those commas? Well, essentially in the CSS style sheet, you can select multiple tags by putting a comma and then the next one. This is different for those of you that have done specificity selections where you're like, I want a class inside of the header or whatever. And so you might do something like header and then class, right? Well, these commas are entirely different. You're not selecting an H5 that's inside of the H4 and H3 and H2 and H1. By putting these commas here, what this essentially means is all of the styles I'm about to put here will apply to any instances of each of these separate tags. So what I can do in here is I can actually say for each of these, I'm actually going to define the font family as Helvetica. And I'm also going to define a backup as Arial. And then if those aren't present, I'm going to use a sans serif. Sans serif. So what is all of this? Okay. So what I've essentially just done is I've defined a font stack. When you hear people talking about, oh, what font stack do you use? Font stack is just a fancy name that we use to make ourselves feel better because it sounds cool. And what it essentially does is it allows you to define which types of fonts you want to use for these tags. So for the H1 that I used, you probably can't see it yet because it's pretty small. We're about to change that though. But I have set it as Helvetica. If Helvetica is not present, we will use Arial. And if Arial is not present, we will use a sans serif. So this is called a font stack, and what it does is it allows you to specify the fonts you want to use and then a fallback, because if these two fonts don't exist on the user's machine in their browser, then it will actually default to some sans serif. So for any sans serif, that basically means sans serif is a serif. For those of you who don't know, serif is like you might have like an I, and then you might have like the little curly things here. You know what I'm talking about? Sometimes you read text and it's got like little curly things on the end, and then you might have like an R right here, and it'll have like little curly things like that, right? That's a serif. A sans serif would be something for an I, it would just be like that or even like this. It doesn't have these little curly things. An R would just be something like this. And you might think, well, why does that matter? Well, it matters because, as it turns out, these are easier to read. Sorry, these are a little bit easier. It tends to look a little prettier. So it's typically you'll see sans serif used a lot for like headlines and stuff like that. You will see serif fonts used a lot for when people are reading. Like our body copy down here. We'll use like a serif for that because those little curly things, it actually tends to make it a little bit easier to read as you're going through the font. So let's go ahead and clear all of this out. All right, so we've defined our font family. The next thing we want to do is I'm actually going to define a font size, and we're going to define 3.4 rem. We're going to save that. Whoops, forgot to put that inside of an H1. Let's do this really quick. Boom. And it should, font size, why is it not applying? You see here, make sure, there we go. I don't know why it wasn't before. Oh, I didn't put the 4, my bad. Typo. All right, so now you see we just blew up the size of our font. So what's a rem? Again, this is going to be a very big overview, but let me go ahead and post in an article in the Zoom chat on CSS units. There you go. So what's a rem? Well, I would encourage all of you to study this a little more in depth. Again, I'm very high overview going over this, but a rem is essentially, and this gets back to this percentage, I am multiplying the user agent style sheet default font size so that by defining rems here with font size, I am able to, it's, how can I explain this? It is essentially you know how you can go into your settings in Chrome and you can say, hey, I want really big text, or I want really small text, or something like that. You know, if you've ever messed around in your settings, you can actually blow the text up on pages. Well, if we had hard-coded this as like 24 pixels, okay? 24 pixels. If we had just hard-coded that, I'm not sure why my number 4 button isn't working. There we go. If we just hard-coded this as 24 pixels, and a user of our site was to go in here and they were to say, hey, I want to blow up my text because I'm really hard of sight, right? Well, this hard-coded value is not going to change. It won't ever change. It's always going to be 24 pixels. If we use the combination of rems and font size percentages here on HTML, it will dynamically resize if we go in and we change the settings. So let's actually do that. Let's go into, let's see here, to font size, see where I set very large. If I go back over here, I believe it's blown up just a tiny little bit. It might not be working on that specific page, but on a normal website, it would actually blow up. It would blow up. So, all right. We're going to move on from font size. I don't want to make anyone go to sleep on that. It's a little bit of an advanced concept, but I'm throwing it in here today so that you have exposure, so that you at least know that rems exist and that you shouldn't necessarily be hard coding like 24 pixels into your site. So we're going to go ahead and move on. We're actually going to go ahead and take our A tags and our P tags like we did before with commas. And for all of this, we're actually going to, I'm just going to copy and paste some styles in here. Boom. So what did I just do? Well, first off, you've seen this before. This is font family. So I've got my font stack here. I defined Times New Roman. See how it's got some little things sticking out here? It's a little bit more pointy, so to speak, than the font that we used up top here. So there is a different font being used, and there's a fallback of serif. We have a font size of 1.8 rems. Again, it's being multiplied by the base font size on our HTML, and people could go into the settings and change it. And finally, we have a text decoration none. What does that do? If we don't have this on our A tags, what happens is, see how those lines just came back on our links? We probably don't want that. We probably don't want that, but what we don't want that base. We don't want that base there. What we do want is for our A tags, we actually are going to get rid of the purple color. We're going to define them as blue, always blue. So I went ahead and applied blue to all of them. And the next thing I want is I'm going to use what's called a pseudo selector. So what's a pseudo selector here? Let me go ahead and finish filling this out, and I'll tell you exactly what it is. We're going to set the opacity on hover to 0.7, and we're going to say text decoration. Up above, we set it to none. Here, we're going to set it to underline. So what does this do? Well, as you can see, now they're blue all the time with no underline, but when we hover over this, the color actually drops a little bit. It gets a little more opaque, and we underline every single one of these words. So a pseudo selector is essentially telling our computer on the A tags, on any A tags on our page, when you hover over them, and that's what this colon hover means, do these styles, but otherwise don't ever do them. So that's super useful, right? You want to be able to indicate to the user that you're hovering over a link. This is a really great way to do that. So I've put an underline only on hover, and I've dropped the opacity down. The opacity just changes how opaque it is. I can make it really, really bad, which doesn't look that great. Or sorry, really, really low. I'm going to leave it at 0.7. The next thing that I actually want to do is I actually want to go ahead and I'm going to define our header. And I'm just going to start styling up stuff here. And I'm going to tell you what I'm doing as I'm doing it. First of all, I'm going to define a max width for the header, and the max width I'm going to define as 1200 pixels. So that's this right here, right? You can't really see what's going on, so this is a good tip for anyone working in CSS. If you want to see what you're doing, use a border 1 pic solid red, or something like that. That allows you to see exactly what you're working with. When I comment that out, see how it stretches all the way across the screen? I'm going to go ahead and leave that max width on. I'm going to define that it will always be width 100%, but there will be a max width of 1200 pixels. So that's the max it can ever go. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to center the entire thing, and I'm going to say margin 0 auto. Notice now that it's centered in the middle of the page, and as I drag it, it can get a little smaller. See how it accommodates a smaller size of the screen. But at max, when my screen expands, it will be centered in the middle of the screen thanks to this margin 0 auto. And it's also going to have a max width of 1200 pixels. So the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to also, let's see here. We're also going to define for each of our sections, for each of our section tags over here. So I'm selecting the section tag now into my CSS. For each of my section tags, again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to define width 100%, max width 1200 pixels, and we're going to put the margin 0 auto in there as well. So boom, just like that, we've got a centered section of our page. The next thing I want to do is I actually want to select each of the p tags, and I'm going to use what's called a specificity chain. Now, what's a specificity chain? So inside of each of my sections, I have p tags, right? By defining section space p, I am telling the computer that the styles I am about to put here should only apply to paragraph tags that are inside of section tags, right? So that allows it to be specific. If we had a p tag elsewhere in our document outside of the section tag, it would not be styled by this. So for this section p tag, I'm actually going to do a few things. First off, before we go any further with that, I actually want to add a border on this. I'm going to add a border 1 pix dashed black. Boom. And now, as you can see, we've got a nice little dash border around all of this. I'm actually also going to throw on a 50 pixel margin, top and bottom here. I'm also going to throw on some padding of 10 pixels and 1%. So as you can see now, there's some padding inside of here. What's going on with that? Without getting too much into it, we are now dealing with the box model of CSS. What is the box model? That is a great question. I'm going to go ahead and paste this link into the Zoom chat. I would highly encourage you to study that in your spare time. But in brief, the box model means that we have content, we have padding, we have a border around the padding, and then we have finally margin outside of our border. As you can see here, by defining a border, we have content, that's all of this text. I set padding of 10 pixels up here and 10 pixels down here, and 1% on each side. And then I have a border here, and I finally have margin. I've got 50 pixels of margin, and it's centered auto. So the box model is also something else that I would highly encourage you study and get a jump on learning if you haven't already prior to entering into Lambda School. This is another good one here. So inside of our p tag, for each p tag, I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to, for each p tag now, I'm going to throw on a margin of 10 pixels. So that's going to space out. Notice now we've got a little bit of breathing room in between each one of our paragraphs. Each one of these sections has 2 paragraph tags. So now I've told it for inside of each section, for each paragraph tag, put 10 pixels of margin on the top and the bottom. Then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to continue on down to the footer. I'm going to go to the footer, and I'm going to select for the footer down here. Once again, one more time, I'm going to put in a margin 0 auto, a max width 100%, and max width of 1200 pixels and a width of 100%. And inside of the footer, I'm going to select the footer A tags in here. And for the A tags, which are these links down here, I'm going to say that I want a margin right of 2%. Boom. So, wow, we went through that really quick, right? Some of you, your head might be spinning a little bit. What I'm going to do now is we haven't gotten through everything yet that I put down to get through, but that's okay. Maybe we might not get through everything today. It's more important to me that we understand what's going on with everything that we've done so far. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to open this up to some question time now. And anyone that wants to can ask questions about what I just did here. And I will explain. If you don't understand some stuff that I did, I will explain how it exactly works and try to answer your question. Any questions from anyone about what I just did? About any of this, semantic HTML, specificity selectors, any of these CSS properties that I've used, anything like that?
So I'm still unsure about div tags. I caught everything else. I liked it. This looked really great. And it was better than doing it on my own by a long shot. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
But
yeah, so you're wondering, like, what's the point of a div tag?
Yeah, should I still be using them at all once I've done all this?
Yes. Div tags are not taboo. So let me do a better job of explaining when you want to use a div tag, okay? Div tags, it stands for division. They have no meaning other than just organizing your content on the page and making it look pretty. So what does that mean? Well, think about it this way. It's important to use these, right? But let's say this. Let's say you've done a section here, right? And let's say you want to have like a division. For some reason you want to group let's say underneath here you have, here's a great example. Let's say we have an H2 tag here, okay? Now, we used an H1 up above, so again, we're using a headline tag that has meaning. This is a less important headline tag because we're using an H2. We're going to say section 1, okay? And we're going to save that. Boom, look at that, section 1. I'm actually going to come over here and throw on an H2, and we're going to define the font size as like 2rem. Okay, so we've got a headline tag here. Well, what happens if, for some reason, we don't want the H2 to be grouped in with everything here? What happens if we want to style this H2 and this P tag separately from this P tag down here? Well, we're already inside of a section, right? So we've already told the computer, this is a section right here. So we've already defined that. How do we, this is just visual, right? This is just a visual grouping because we want to maybe manipulate the styles or something like that. Well, that's where a div tag comes in. A div tag would allow us to, right here, go ahead and write div, and then what we'll do is we'll press tab to move this all in a little bit, and now nothing's changed visually yet on the page. Nothing's changed visually yet for this stuff right here, this paragraph and this section tag. But by grouping it inside of this division tag, which screen readers aren't going to look at that and think that it's a big deal, right? What we can do, just purely for styling purposes, is we can come over here and we can say inside of each section, if there is a div tag, so section div, again, this is our specificity chain here, so the div tag inside of any section, we're going to say, if we have that, then the background for this will be just normal gray, not dark gray. And boom, look at that. Now we have custom styling just for these elements inside of this section. And we've done that by grouping them together with a div tag. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I would use it like on my blog, like my first paragraph, I want the text to be bigger.
Yeah.
And that would be the perfect thing to do a div
Yeah.
paragraph 1. Yeah,
Yeah,
cool. Thanks.
you could do a div, absolutely. You could do a div, paragraph 1. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. I did not spend so long talking about semantic HTML earlier to make people scared of using divs. I write divs every single day of the week. But here's why I said semantic HTML is important. Can you imagine if someone loads into the page and this is what they see? Div. And then for main, div. And instead of a section, div. And it just stands for division. So someone with a screen reader that might be really hard of sight or even blind, it's going to scan this page and it's going to say, here's a division, but we have no clue what that is. Oh, it looks like there's a nav bar in here, but what if that nav bar is also div? So like you're looking at this, the screen reader is going to freak out. It's not going to know how to read your page. So now your page is not accessible for a sizable proportion of the world that might not be able to otherwise read your site. And it's just in general going to be very hard to read if your page gets really big and complex and someone that hasn't worked on your code before sits down to write code, which is a very real thing, right? We're all here because we want to get jobs when we're done. We want to become developers, right? So what happens if you're out in the workplace and you write a web page and then someone else, one of your coworkers, sits down to work on it maybe later in the afternoon while you're working on something else, and it's this massive page and they're like, there's like 200 div tags in here. They're not going to know how to edit it. Instead, using the semantic HTML structure here of main tags, header tags, nav tags, all of this good stuff, and then sometimes using div tags for styling of the page and organization, some organization, that allows you to have a really nice setup. So it's totally okay to use div tags. Just don't go wild and use them for everything. For the main structural components of your page, try to use semantic HTML. Does that make sense? Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah,
Right.
that made a lot of sense. I caught most of that in the beginning, but I was just kind of lost on where if I was going to use them anyhow. And yeah, that gave me a great example and everything. And particularly then showing, because I read HTML where it's had that like 30 levels of div tags and everything. And it's
div soup, right?
So I love that example. Yeah, perfect.
You can actually, if you become an expert in accessibility, that is an entire field in and of itself in tech. You can go be the accessibility expert on Twitter and the internet someday. You could be that person. You could go work at Microsoft and be on probably a team in a company that big. I'm just using them as an example, but any large tech company probably has, they do. They have accessibility experts on their team. If you are passionate enough about this as an area, a subfield of tech, you could do this just as a career and probably make a lot of money doing it, because this is a huge deal. Just like businesses want to make in real life, physical businesses want to make their office buildings accessible, websites more and more need to be accessible for everyone. However, even if you don't want to make this your area of specialty, it's still crucial to at least know about semantic HTML and the basics of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I'm a microscopist, and I know that a lot of things we've done in my profession have been really bad. Like we use one of the main imaging technologies that we do today uses red-green a color pair for all of the images, and it's just horrendous for people
that are colorblind.
The most common type of color blindness.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I do work on disability rights advocacy, so I do always like to pay attention to these things, and that's why I'm trying to learn really hard going through the W3 schools and all the semantic web stuff. So I really appreciate your emphasis on this.
It's so important, and even if people don't think it's important, which I want to commend you for caring about this, a lot of new people in this field don't, quite frankly, and it is important for everyone to at least have a minimum exposure to this, even if they're not their company's expert on it. But even if you don't care at the level that you do, which is I think it's amazing, and I really want to commend you for that. You should know, because companies, this isn't theoretical, companies have been sued and lost because their sites were not, they were like horrible for people that had accessibility needs. So this is very important. It's a hot topic in tech, and it is, you will be more valuable as an engineer if you are good at this kind of stuff. So any other questions? Great questions so far. Really good questions. It looks like there's a few things popping off in the Zoom thread. Yep. Oh, nice. Good point, Chris. Domino's. Yeah. Turns out people want to order pizza, and they want to be able to order pizza online, even, you know, everyone should be able to order pizza. Yep. GDPR. That's a huge thing now in the European Union. And I'm sure a lot of that kind of stuff will, and more it will be happening in the United States and other nations as well. So again, if you are on the cutting edge, you know, this is like cutting edge stuff when we're talking about like going down that rabbit hole of accessibility. You can, it's like very modern, very cutting edge. These tools, accessibility tools, did not exist, you know, 10 years ago. So if you make this a focus of your career, there are many paths you can walk down to be an expert. But if you were to do this, this is just one example of an area that you could make an entire career out of. So yeah, absolutely. That's cool to know. Tech is really cool because typically if there's a subset of tech that you're really passionate about, chances are you can do that and become an expert in that. And people will start coming to you for advice. So it's really cool. And it takes everyone to make the world go around, right? Like if everyone wants to go become an accessibility expert, we'd have too many. So we need people that specialize in different key areas at big companies. If you work at a startup, chances are the demand will be more that you're able to do everything. But yeah, anyways. Any other questions from anyone? Any other questions? I do have one more link to drop in the channel. We aren't going to have time to talk about it today, and so I didn't throw it into this webpage as I was making it, but I want you to get a start learning it eventually, and that is Flexbox. Flexbox is a module in CSS you can bring in, and I see some people nodding their heads. Flexbox is a module, a CSS module that you can bring into CSS, and it allows you to do, you know here how we have this page. What if we want these links over here on this side of the header, and we want to maybe have this section be half of this, and then this paragraph be the other half over here? Like, how would we do that, right? We could use some really archaic stuff right now, and we could bust it out. I'm not going to for time's sake, but we could. Flexbox is a more modern alternative. There are several now. CSS Grid is another. But Flexbox is what is currently taught the most at Lambda School. If you are thinking of going into Lambda, I do not think you need to be an expert in Flexbox. But I'm going to post a link here. It's actually a game. It's going to make it really easy for you to learn Flexbox, like really easy to learn the CSS commands. You could knock out 2 or 3 playthroughs of this game in a single afternoon, in like an hour or two. So I'm going to go ahead and post that here. I would highly recommend that you don't need to have this memorized, but I would recommend that you at least get exposure to this, that you learn, and so that when you learn this at Lambda, this isn't like, oh, what the heck's going on? It's going to be more of a, oh, hey, I remember this. I remember, like, yeah, totally. I saw this on that Flexbox Froggy game. So maybe in the next week or two here, take some time on the weekend and run through this Flexbox Froggy game. Again, I just pasted that into the Zoom chat. Any other questions from anyone? We can move now. If no one else has any other questions about semantic HTML and CSS, we could even talk for a little bit about Lambda School itself and any questions you might have for me as a student. Anyone? Any questions? Let's see.
No, but thank you so much. This was very useful. I appreciate it.
Of course. Any questions from anyone? You're absolutely welcome.
Yeah, this really helped me out. I'm doing just fine on my own, but being able to talk about it and hear someone talk about it has been really good for me.
That's good. I'm very glad. Sometimes just seeing someone run through something, even if you've got exposure to it already, it just like flips a switch in your mind. And you're like,
Yep.
oh, yeah, totally, that makes sense. You know, like maybe sometimes all it takes is once more over the content and it just ingrains itself. So I'm going to go ahead and post the CodePen link for what I did today. Let me know if that doesn't work for those that open it right now. That's what we just made. So if you want to play around with the styles, take it from there and add more stuff, be my guest. I'm seeing a question here from Ashley. Are you going part-time or full-time? Great question. I am currently a full-time student. I am a part-time section lead of a cohort. And I've kind of done it all. Yeah, no, Chris is in my cohort, and I think several other here as well. Jessica, I believe you're also in my cohort. Yeah, it's a good cohort. We got a good group in part-time 9. Part-time 10 just started, which is crazy. We're now the sophomores in part-time 9. Even though that's not really how it works, but it's weird to think that someday you guys will be the seniors, the senior class, the dominant class doing back-end servers and stuff like that, and giving advice to people that come behind you. And it's going to come sooner than you think. I started in November with Lambda. I've been at Lambda for 9 months. Yeah, promotion, woo. I started back in November. I think I said when I started here, this recording today, I had no programming background prior to Lambda. So if that gives some of you hope that might be really stressed out about this stuff right now, let me be the first to tell you, if no one has, that all that matters is how hard you work. You don't need to be a genius. You don't need to be like some Tony Stark or whatever, like building Iron Man suits in your free time. All that matters, although I'm just going to say, to be fair, everyone that I've met here at Career Karma is just sharp as a whip. Like, there's a reason I keep coming back and doing these workshops, because I see people from Career Karma coming through Lambda and just working hard and killing it. That can be you if it's not already. All that matters, and our director of instruction at Lambda says this all the time, in his 15 or 20-year career in tech, the engineers he's seen that have been the most successful are not the ones that come in with like genius level IQ. Although that helps, right? It's nice to have that. But they're the people that work hard and that never give up, even when they get bugs in their code. They just keep working and they keep working. And if they get punched by the code, they get right back up and they keep working. And I think that's what matters the most. I had no programming background prior to Lambda, and I have worked my butt off being here. And it's paid off. I'm not a genius or anything. I've just studied really hard for a very long time. And if you're willing to do that, that's going to be you too. And if anything, that should be encouraging to you. Don't let that intimidate you, because that should tell you, if I come in with grit, that's all that matters. If I just keep working at it and chipping away at that stone, eventually I'll have a sculpture. And fortunately, your work ethic is something you can control in life, right? So you can control whether or not you succeed at this. Yeah, so I'm a full-time cohort, reps and reps and reps, exactly. Okay, Fran, it looks like you have some questions. Is that correct? Oh, sorry, you're talking to Ashley. Sorry about that. I don't have any kids, so I can't speak to that. I think it's awesome that we have some people here that can. I have been the section lead of a full-time cohort and now a part-time cohort, and have had many people both working with me as team leads, which they're the people that work underneath me with students to like grade assignments and stuff. I've had team leads that have lots of kids, I've had lots of students come through that have lots of kids. And it is a labor of love, but again, I have seen lots of parents do it. It is not impossible. You will need to probably come up with a really good schedule. So figure out, like, this is the time that I have to study. This is when I'm going to do my homework. And then this fixed time is family time, right? This is time with my kids or whatever. And then also, like, your kids need to know, and the best successes I've seen with families have done this. They have like a little, even if it's in the same room where their family is, maybe they'll put on headphones or whatever to concentrate. But their family knows, their kids know, during this time, you know, mom and dad, whichever, you know, whoever is in the program, they can't be bothered. You know, these hours when they're studying in the evening, say for instance for a part-time cohort, that's study time. And then, you know, at like 10 or 11 or whatever it might be, if the kids are still up, I don't know if they'd still be up that late. That's probably not a good call as a parent. But if they were up, then you could spend time with them, or you could spend time earlier in the evening. That's typically what I've seen. But again, there are others here that are better able to answer that than me. Let's see, what other tips do I have as long as we're still here? It's 2:03, so if anyone needs to leave, they can. I'll stay for a few more minutes since we did get an upgraded Zoom. Thanks, Chris. Not sure what strings you had to pull with Zoom to make that happen, but
it just happened. I didn't do nothing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, they just gave it to me. I'm not
cool. So you're doing a pre-course. If you're not already in Lambda, you're probably doing the pre-course right now, right? I did it. Others that are here that are in a part-time cohort, like Jessica and Chris, they did it. They took a test to get in, just like I did. Something I would advise is when you're doing the pre-course, use something free like Google Docs. Okay, make a Google Docs account, doesn't cost you a penny, and take notes on everything you're learning. And here's why. The first month-ish of Lambda, whether or not you're full-time or part-time, is going to be focused on what we were talking about tonight, HTML and CSS. In the pre-course, you do JavaScript, right? Well, what I've seen already in 2 cohorts is that in that time of doing HTML and CSS in the cohort, students don't go and review JavaScript at all. And JavaScript is a huge part of web development. There's a reason why a lot of the pre-course time is spent on JavaScript. But if you don't go and just read through your notes, maybe, you know, 2 or 3 nights a week, you just read them for like 15 minutes or whatever. If you don't do something like that, then after a month goes by, you might have forgotten some of that stuff that you fought so hard for in order to pass that test and to get into Lambda. And I don't think you need to be like doing hours and hours of JavaScript work every single day, but at least take some notes and then go and review it, because it will give you a leg up when you finally hit the JavaScript sections, because you're not going to be like, man, how did for loops work again? And like, what about array methods? And, you know, I hate to see that. It breaks my heart when I see that in evening stand-up forums from students saying, like, I had no idea the stuff from the pre-course was going to pop up again, and I should have known. And like, man, what did you think we had you study all that for like a month in the pre-course, you know? But that's fair, you know? So I'm giving you a heads up now. Heads up now. You don't need to study hours and hours every day, but do yourself a favor and review it, because your future self will thank you when you have reviewed JavaScript by the time you get to JavaScript inside Lambda School. Let's see. Anyone else have any questions? I'll stay for a few more minutes. You've been an awesome group, and you've listened to my soapbox speeches about things that are important at Lambda. It's only because I care about all of you. I've been through 2 cohorts now as a section lead, and I know what works from seeing students hustle.
Hi, Nathan. It's Courtney.
Hi, Courtney.
I see a question from William, and I was actually going to project and talk about it. When you're taking notes, it's what matters, what's important to you, what doesn't make sense to you. Like if you're looking over your pre-course and you see, you know, formulas, syntax, how they're laying out, how you do a for loop, for example. You want to make sure that that's what you're noting. Not every single word on the page, but
Yes.
if there's a word you don't understand, that gets written down. If there's a syntax on the page, that's something you want to write down, because that's the stuff that's going to come back and you're going to be like, what in the world?
100%.
This happened to me. So
100%. Let's see here. Here is here's a good example I'll just share with the squad here of what I took when I was in React. Now, for those students here that are actually in part-time 9, we haven't gotten to React yet, but when I was a student and when I was in your shoes, I used Google Doc. And just like I said, not just in the pre-course, I did this in every course. And this is for React Router, which don't worry about what React Router is right now. That's way too much stress for a Sunday before you're in React. I'm just showing you this as an example of me. Like in lecture, I would take screenshots, right? Again, none of this cost me anything. This is all free. Google Docs is free. I just take notes on what confused me that I thought I might want to be able to go back and do later. And so I'd take notes on stuff. I jot down things that I thought were really important. And then, yeah, see, I've got more notes for Wednesday, and then if we keep scrolling, yep, Thursday. So this is an entire week worth of content right here that I took notes on. Again, not everything. And then as I was doing the homework, every day, say Tuesday after I finished the homework, or sorry, when I started the homework, I would go and I would reference my notes if I got stuck. And you know what? A lot of times, what I was confused on would be something that I wrote down because it confused me in class, and I was so happy that I wrote it down, because otherwise I would have had to gone hunting on the training kit inside Lambda, hunting to like figure out where that was, and instead I just had it like right here. So yeah, if you're going, I'll actually give you a pro tip. One last thing before I leave that is really going to help you if you choose to use Google Docs. You can use anything, right? You could use Microsoft Word if you have it. You could use Pages if you have a Mac. You could use whatever, even if like text edit or something like that, like a notepad or something. But if you use Google Docs, there is a free extension that is called Code Blocks. You can install this. You start it up, and it looks like it needs to install. Needs to install an update. It's been a while since I've used it. Yep, allow. So I'm going to go ahead once this finishes installing. Okay, so I've started up Code Blocks. It's a pop out over here in the corner. And what I can do is I can say, I am using the language of JavaScript right now. You can actually, it'll auto format a whole bunch of different languages, but the one you'll probably use the most is JavaScript, and maybe there's CSS, I think, in here, and HTML. See, there's HTML right there. So what you can do is you can select anything. Let's say right here, I say, for those of you who have written JavaScript before, this is going to look familiar. Function, do something. I'm going to pass in data into here. And then I'm going to have, like, just for now, I'm just going to have a comment that I would finish this later, right? But what you can actually do is you can highlight this, and you can say, format. Boom. Just like that, inside of your Google Docs, your Google Doc, it will format the entire thing, and I could even keep typing in here. It actually gets a little funky with the coloring if you type in it after you format it, but you could type a whole bunch of stuff. So let's say like I wanted to do like const array equals, and we're going to have like an empty array, and then we would for data coming in for each item. And if you don't understand everything I'm doing, that's okay. I'm just jotting down some code as placeholder to take up space. But for each item, I'm going to push to the array up above item, and I'm going to cap it off. And at the very end, I'm going to return the array. So this function takes in an array of data, it pushes it to a new array, and then it returns that new array. That sounds super useless, and that's because it is. This is just an example. But yeah, it formats it all for you. So what you can do is, as you're working in class, you're working with the pre-course, if there's something that you think in the future you're going to be really confused on, you want to get it down and make it look pretty, you can write out the code like I just did and then format it so it looks really nice. And then you can take like text notes around it, above and below it, about what it's doing. So yeah, highly recommend Code Blocks. Again, it's called Code Blocks. It's a free download. I found it somewhere and I used it religiously throughout all of Lambda, and it's just like thebomb.com. So yeah, totally recommend that if you're going to use Google Docs. All right, Chris, I think that's pretty much everything, probably.
All right, sir. I do appreciate it again. I know you're very busy. You're in labs, and then you got to deal with us as well.
Oh, you guys are awesome. It's a great cohort. Part-time 9's the best.
So we really appreciate your time today.
For sure.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone else for stopping in and actually engaging. Thank you, Chris and Nathan, for hooking this up, because it was definitely a much needed review for especially me. I just finished that section, so.
Good. Hey, I hear you. One of the small reasons that I chose to become a section lead the first time was because I was like, wow, free refresher over the content. I totally hear you. You can never go over this stuff too many times. This was a good review just for me, going over this with all of you. You know, like you can never review the fundamentals too much. You know, they talk in sports about learning the